Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's guest is Darryl Lyons. Darryl came from a humble trailer park in Castroville, Texas, and has risen to be a rock star in the financial world. He got his start in finance with New York Life, the pinnacle of a sales environment, and learned quickly that he was not good at sales. He stuck with it, though, and achieved Rookie of the Year through sheer grit. He was not operating in his wheelhouse. He had to work in an uncomfortable skill area to make it work, and mental toughness only took him so far. A series of bad trades and a tough run led to frustration and anxiety. While Darryl's wife was pregnant with their third child, his daughter had a terrible accident that found her in the emergency room having a finger reattached. Darryl's wife then lost their baby, and they were devastated. He turned to a friend with faith, and they prayed together. Darryl heard God ask him, "Are you done yet? You're living a life I didn't plan for you." His friend helped him understand the fruit of the Spirit, and Darryl began to trust in God and let him lead. Darryl's now on the Dave Ramsey Advisory Council. He's had a park named after him in San Antonio by the mayor. He's published his fourth book titled Biblical Responsible Investing, and his team has been named to the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies for the fourth year in a row. I'm excited to have Darryl on the show today to share his story of helping others while letting God lead him. And with that, Darryl Lyons, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Man, this is going to be a very exciting and just juicy subject. I can't wait to dig into it because it's been coming out more and more in some of my second half of my, if you look at this block of episodes that I've got, roughly around getting close to 100.
Wow.
Around the last 40 or so, I would say. My faith journey has been coming out more and more on the episodes on the show, and I just love talking about people that have been on a similar or any faith journey and that are really willing to put that out there and be faith forward and talk about their relationship with God and how they came to that relationship, and in what is a world that is, I would say, fairly opposed to that, and that's maybe being some soft talk in there, saying fairly opposed. I think there's quite a bit of attack going on in the world today, and so people that are willing to step out, especially in industries maybe that have classically or historically shied away from talking about faith or religion or just trusting God and belief in God. I'm always honored and humbled that people are willing to do that on the show. So excited to chop it up with you.
Yeah, thank you. Should be a good conversation. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So let's talk about life growing up in Castroville in that trailer park. What was it like? What's your family situation? And
Yeah. So, kind of the way it worked out is, I've lived in like the South Texas area for a long time. We lived in a town called Bernie, which was actually a little bit more like middle class. And in the 80s, there was this S&L crisis and oil fell. And that's when our family really started to struggle financially, because my mom had me when she was 16, my dad was 20. So, they didn't really have the education to, when the market crashes, they're not exactly going to be the first one to get a premium job. So they went to look for work. So we moved down to Harlingen, which is like 30 minutes from the border. And that was kind of a cultural shock for me. And we struggled financially. We actually didn't live in a trailer then. We lived in, suburban areas, but just still, it was kind of trailer-like, but with the suburban house. And then moved to Castroville my senior year of high school, which is always a challenge, right? To move your senior year. And so that's when we lived in the little trailer park in Castroville, Texas. And I really started to think deeply about what my life should look like and what it could look like. And in that trailer park, I realized that, there's something better out there.
What did your dad do for a living? What did your mom and dad do?
Yeah. So my dad, he worked for a company for a while, and then he ended up starting his own business, and it's fire and safety. So, you go in restaurants and they have these fire suppression systems that dumps chemicals if there's a flare up. He would install those. I mean, he would turn the wrench and go up in the ladders. In fact, my first job at 14 was at 2:00 in the morning till 5:00 in the morning is scrape the grease out of those vent hoods and suck it up with a vacuum. And it was a pretty disgusting job. And so that was, that was the worst. And so, I was around that industry, fire suppression, which actually is a pretty good industry, pretty good business. And my mom stayed at home. Yeah.
Okay. And you had siblings or
I have a brother who's actually an entrepreneur too, and a sister who's also an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So a family of business owners and entrepreneurs. And older brother and sister,
Oh,
or
younger brother, younger sister.
so you're the oldest?
I'm the oldest. Yeah.
Okay. So did you have a model? So if your dad, did he go to college, or did you have college in your background at all? Or,
No, no.
okay. Was your thought to go to school, or what happened then?
Well, for a long time, I thought my ticket was going to be college football. That was kind of my thinking is I wanted to play college football. That would have been a ticket out. I'd be a coach and maybe I'd live in a house with a foundation.
Yeah.
Because I remember edging, I remember edging the skirting of our trailer and thinking, if you hit if the plastic hits the skirting on the weed eater, then it cracks the skirting. And I was like, okay, how do you have a house with a foundation? So that's where my mind went. And I was like, okay, if I'm a coach, maybe. And so I always thought that that would be my ticket out because I really didn't have another point of reference. Nobody in our family went to college. So
Yeah.
um, I ended up, by the grace of God, getting an academic scholarship to St. Mary's University and got around a lot of people that were thinking differently. And that was revelation to me. St.
Okay.
Mary's University. Yeah.
Okay. And so St. Mary's, so private, was it Catholic, or was it just private
Private,
Christian?
private Catholic. Yeah.
Private Catholic
Private Catholic
school in
school.
the San Antonio area?
Yep.
Okay. So were you living at home and going to school, or did you live on
N-
campus, or?
No, I lived on campus. Yeah, I got a pretty good scholarship. There's a couple reasons I got a scholarship. My grades were above average; they weren't below average, so that was good. But I wasn't top of my class or anything. But I did write some compelling letters. I was a pretty good writer, and then secondly, I just didn't have a family history of going to college, so being first gen, that was attractive to the university. So I lived on campus and had an incredible experience and had all the fun I needed to have. And I don't know how I pulled it off because I worked at Bank of America all through college.
Mm,
That's how I paid my way through school. And so I worked there nearly full time and had academic rigor and had a good time. So still don't know how I did it, but I did it.
okay. And so, what were your thoughts? I mean, at that point, so you're going to school, are you getting a finance degree? Are you thinking, what were your plans to do with this degree that you were going to get?
I followed some of my peers who went into the business area, and I took some accounting courses, and the professor said, "You're pretty good at accounting. Can you tutor others?" And then I took an investment course, and the requirement was whoever made the most money on the stock market, a fake stock market game at the end of the semester would get the best grade, and I won that. And so I'm taking a little bit of this feedback from my peers and professors that I had an affinity in the planning, investment, business space. And the problem for me is I didn't really understand what to do with that because, my demographic, financial planners, that just didn't exist. Investment analyst was new. So I had to do some research. I was in the library kind of studying careers.
Yep.
And that led me to December 1999. The day after I graduated, ended up working with New York Life.
Okay.
Because
So,
I didn't know where to go. So I just picked one.
yep.
Yeah.
So, you graduated 99. So you're 9 years, basically 9 years behind me. I had a similar, not, I wouldn't say similar, but when I was in school, I was a finance major, and I had this dream that, the movie Wall Street was recently out.
Yeah.
And so I was going to be, what's his name?
Gordon Gecko.
Yeah, well, yeah, not, but the younger guy. I'm on to say Tom Cruise. It wasn't Tom Cruise. It's
Charlie
Charlie Sheen,
Sheen.
of
Yeah.
course. Sure, Charlie Sheen, and be the. I was like, oh, I'm Bud Fox, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the
Yeah.
guy. It was all what I took from that movie was certainly it was a drama, right? And there was all sorts of chaos that went on in that movie. But I was like, oh, I like paying attention to stocks, studying financial statements. The market was very intriguing. I had a financial investing course. I'm like, this is exciting. I'm going to go out and be a stockbroker. And what you don't realize when you're 21, at least I didn't, 21 years old, that meant sales. That meant you were going to be on the phone selling. No one cared about your knowledge of financial statements. At least that was my take when I came out and I started interviewing. I'm like, and I was interviewing with insurance companies and financial services companies, and it was all about, it's a sales job, man. You're going to dial that phone. And I was thinking, no, like this is not, no, I don't want to do that. That's not what I thought this was. And maybe I should have done more research. The internet wasn't around then, but it was like, maybe I should have done more research into what that occupation was. Because I quickly said, I'm going into banking, and I went into banking to learn lending. But So talk about, so you come out in the day you graduate or the day after, you're working for New York Life. And what was
Yeah,
that
and I
like?
didn't know either. There was a guy that was a CFP at New York Life, and my intent was just to have a mentor because I didn't know how to tie a tie or do some of the things that were
Mm.
necessary. So I was just looking for a mentor, and he seemed like a good guy. Um, but yeah, it was very much sales, and I learned that real quickly. And not having a lot of potential rich people, I didn't know any rich people, frankly. I ended up, and I'm really not exaggerating. I knocked on thousands and thousands of doors, businesses, and neighborhoods, and I just was doing. The way I thought about it was like my job is to either be in front of people or figure out a way to be in front of people. So they gave me a letter about 6 months into the career saying if you don't hit a certain production number, we're gonna have to let you go. And I ended up knocking on a door. A guy named Joe Williams said we need a buy sell funded, so it's business owner insurance and a 401k plan. And so that was kind of my ticket. I ended up getting that case. It was very large. I'll never forget actually getting the case. My hands was shaking. I was so nervous because I knew what it meant to me. And
Yeah.
so I kept my job and it gave me a little confidence. So I ended up getting some traction and then I got rookie of the year. And then what they do in these industry, many of them is if you're good, then they ask you to be a manager. And they asked me to do that. And then I developed a nice team of people and I won an award there too. But I was that path, if you like think about it, it's not it's pretty easy to kind of forecast it. You end up running an office and then you have success at that office, then they move you to another office, they keep moving you to bigger offices. So I figured with my tenacity, like my ambition, I was going to end up in a big city like New York or Chicago eventually. And that just didn't resonate with me. So I quit.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the whole financial services thing, because my experience in having been around it a bit was that, and it's likely similar to any business where you can find really good natured, very well-intentioned people trying to do well for their clients, trying to do well for others. And then you can find some that are really kind of self-serving. It's all about wealth, all about making money for themselves. What was your experience in that New York life environment, which is, again, so for listeners that are maybe picturing things like Boiler Room, right? Or, or Wall Street, where it's all about, sort of almost taking advantage of the client, and fooling's maybe a strong word, but basically selling what you got to sell, whether it's a fit or not. Like, I've got stuff I'm here trying to do. And how did that sort of resonate with you as you're coming up as a 21-year-old kid trying to learn from others around you?
Um, I had studied finance pretty deeply in college, and so I wasn't coming into a business that I was completely ignorant of. Like I had been thinking about this deeply, and I knew how to use a present value calculator and a future value calculator very well. I mean, I could understood compounding. The challenge that exists in this specific this insurance space is that the main purpose of the existence of these organizations of the New York Lifes is to sell permanent life insurance. And so I didn't have conviction in that strategy. And so that made it very difficult for me to
Yeah.
be in that space. And so some people, intentioned people, um, find that that's the right approach, but I couldn't get into it. For a little while, I would kind of make up like a kind of manufacture a
Yeah.
belief, but it just, you just know there's just this conflict in you.
Right. And so that dissonance starts to sort of
Oh
create
yeah.
some friction, right? Where you're like, man,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so did you,
Yeah.
go ahead, sorry.
No, eventually you just can't keep doing that.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
ultimately decide to leave 'cause it's like, I need to do something different. What do you go off and go do from leaving New York Life?
So yeah, I was at that point kind of recruiting, and there was a competitor in town. And actually there's another insurance company, Mass Mutual, but they really, when I was competing against them, they were doing a lot of deep work in the financial planning space.
Hmm.
Better than anyone in San Antonio, even though they were still manufacturing product, the financial planning expertise was well known in our community. And I need to sharpen myself in that technical skill. so that I went over there, and they have kind of an entrepreneurial kind of environment. So I simultaneously had a Mass Mutual business card, and then I had also had this Lyons Financial Services business card, and they just allow you to do that. And so I operated under there for a little while, and I had while I was there, I bumped into a couple of guys that were about my age, and one of the guys came up to me and said, I heard that you like Dave Ramsey. And I wasn't common at that time, because
Mm.
if you're in the financial services business, Dave Ramsey wasn't, he was like for the other people who don't know money. And so
Right.
nobody liked Dave at the time, but I liked him. And so he goes, "Do you want to get an endorsement by him, because he'll send you leads?" And I was like, sounds like a boss. But I said yes because I liked Andres. And so at that point, Dave started sending me and Andres and this other guy a bunch of leads, because he was just starting his radio show. And we were just getting so many leads that um, we ran into this conflict with Mass Mutual, where they actually sent me a letter and said, uh, you're really going to need to choose between Dave Ramsey and Mass Mutual, because there's philosophical differences. Dave doesn't like permanent life insurance and we do. So you're going to need to choose. And we chose to work with Dave. And we then shifted over to that entrepreneurial environment, but collided all of our solo business cards into one and called it Pax Financial Group. And that's what we started. And then Dave became a catalyst for our growth.
So how did that act? That's amazing. How did that work? I mean, so here you are, you've got your shingle out, you're working for Mass Mutual, you're building your own thing, and this connection knows Dave Ramsey, and obviously Dave. So what year would this have been that Dave was just getting going? Is this like
Like
04, 05?
2005.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
4, 5, so 5. And so which is amazing to think about Dave Ramsey just getting started, because Dave is like the
Yeah.
man now. He's
Yeah.
built an absolute empire. I've actually stood right at his front gate in Franklin, Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
He has a beautiful house up on a hill in Franklin, Tennessee, and you can run right to it. There's a gate out. You can't get to the house itself, but you can get to the front gate, see the house in the background. But it's
And I've
beautiful.
spent some time at his house.
Oh yeah, up
Yeah, I
that
mean,
giant hill. That's hard to run up.
yeah, I think he's moving, but overall, I would say this: he's an incredible man. He really is. He's a legitimate guy. He's not a hypocrite. I've worked not. I mean, we don't have like, hey, I mean, he knows me, I know him, but
Yeah.
not any cell phone relationship or anything like that. But I will say, watching him over the years, he's just a genuine man that really does a really, really exceptional thing for really a lot of people.
Yeah, so that's good to hear. He is what you see is what you get, right? It's not like he's not living a separate life or a different life other
No,
than
no,
what you see. That's good
no.
to hear.
Yeah, good
I was
man.
hoping that that was the case. He seems that way when you watch him. He just, and I know people are that way, but he seems very genuine. Like, of
Yeah, he is, and he's obviously not perfect. He's got
course.
his things, but yeah, I still kind of follow him, because we have got some really close mutual friends. So I asked some of my buddies, "Hey, how's Dave doing?" "Oh, I ran into Dave the other day, and he said so and so and so." The Nashville folk, and so,
Right, right.
but I'll just say this: I just always kind of give credit where credit's due, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to build packs, and he was an important part of that story.
So here he is giving you leads. So what that mean? What does that mean basically? He's got his radio show. People are like, I need some financial help, and he's sending you like, here's a potential client. Is that
Yeah, and it was a little formalized. We would get they would go online, and it's like kind of still early stages, or they would call in. And then he had kind of geographic territories, and so we had all of greater San Antonio. And there's basically like three territories at the time. There's San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston. Since now today, there's I don't know, maybe 100 territories. He's kind of really made it completely different, but at the time we just had the territory. So I was seeing, like, giving financial advice to 6 or 7 people a day. I mean, it was just a lot of people. It was exhausting, but it was fun, but it was exhausting at the same time.
wow? And is there some sort of like official relationship that exists at that point? Are you like a franchise or some sort of like a Dave Ramsey certified person or?
Yeah, they called us endorsed local providers.
Okay.
And the Security Exchange Commission years ago took issue with that language, so they changed it to SmartVestor Pro, and so that's what it's known to be today.
Okay. I got you. I got you. Okay. And so, it's interesting because I can't remember what point in my career, but I sat in a seminar where someone stood at the front of the room and he was sort of this like a Dave Ramsey coach. And he was,
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of, I'm trying to remember what the pitch was. If it was, hey, invest with us, or if it was, hey, come be a Dave Ramsey coach too and give seminars on how to get debt free and some of that. Do you ring a bell? Does that ring any bell?
Well, it could have been a coach. You know, they've got these coaches out there. It's just hard. It's a hard business to coach broke
Mm,
people. Um, I mean, you know, so I
right.
haven't seen anybody really develop a, a Ramsey coaching practice without it being more of a side gig and
Yep.
a labor of love. But it's out there. It's a tricky one.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So you're building up this practice. It's exhausting. You're seeing lots of clients. I'm
Mhm.
assuming you're raising lots of money and
Yeah, yeah.
building a big book. And then at what point does so I would assume that financially you're doing well at this point. You're feeling like things are kicking, or
Yeah,
where's
it's
your
doing
head at?
pretty good, but I'm also kind of thinking long term. So I'm not taking a lot of distributions. I'm like building out a team and doing infrastructure stuff. So I'm not still not ranking it in. You know, I've got cars that are, you know, but I'm not like, there was a time where I was at a pawn shop and
Yeah.
just for gas, and there was a time why I mean it's almost embarrassing to say, but I had to use a like a cash advance check for my mortgage. I mean, I had kind of moved from that time, but now I was kind of normal struggles. Like, okay, hey,
Yeah.
we need a new car. Okay, well, let's try to save up. It was different, and I also bought out Andres, our third partner, because Andres, um, Dave had called Andres and said, Andres, can you take my message and change it into Spanish and become kind of an influencer under my brand? And so I ended up buying Andres out very amicably. He went to go work with Dave. And so I had also had to kind of reconstruct the organization after that purchase.
Okay. All right. So now it's
Mhm.
you and just one other partner, or
Yep. Yep.
okay, so
Joseph.
okay. So the two of you. All right. And so you're growing the business. Things are getting at least somewhat the less tension financially in terms of being able to pay bills and take care of your family. And your family at this point, your wife is staying home. You've got a couple kids, or how many
Yeah.
kids?
Yeah. I have two kids. Yeah.
Two kids at this point.
Hmm.
And so is this when your daughter has the accident that she has?
Yeah, yeah. We were yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of my philosophy in life, because I heard it from a coach and it never was lost on me, was mental toughness, extra effort, MTXE. And so that was always my you know, my mantra. And I always loved Jesus, so I always went to the Bible, and there was a scripture in there that said, "Go like an ant, you sluggard, consider his ways and be wise." And so it's just a kind of a tough man's like grind it kind of scripture. And so I bought into that, and that was kind of the way I did life. And you know, it worked pretty well. I broke through a lot of barriers that I think maybe a lot of people would have, you know, turned around. But um, the it was starting to get a little tough. I was just feeling frustrated. I had placed a trade on a client's account and lost him money, and he was really mad. And I also remember one situation I was in. It's kind of all around the same time. I was in San Diego for a conference, and I got lost on a morning jog, and I left my phone back at the hotel, and that
Oh,
was really difficult. I was late to the conference. I mean, I know it doesn't sound like a big deal, but these are all kind of like what the hell's wrong with you? Like,
yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
so, um, but then I'm like, okay, let's just chillax. I'm going to, um, let my wife rest on a Saturday, and I'm going to take my daughter Claire to the grocery store called HEB right up the road. And so I drive her up. I'm driving a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and she's in the back seat. She's a cute little blonde, and we roll down the windows. It's a beautiful February day, like sunglasses and leather jacket kind of day. And she screams, and she had stuck her finger between the window and the frame. Um, and the window, she had kicked the electronic up button, so the window was up.
Going up.
So um I thought I was gonna have to punch the window because I couldn't get the button for it to go down because her foot was still on it. I swerved over to the McDonald's parking lot. She released her foot, the window came down, but her finger was hanging off and blood was all over her little princess dress. So I raced over to the hospital, which was right around the corner. Um, and I was obviously shaken and nervous, but that night they successfully reattached her finger, which was nice. It still has a scar today. She's 16 years old, still has a scar to remind me. But unfortunately, that night, my wife, who was pregnant with our third child, lost the baby. And so this is all feeling heavy. And this idea of MTXE wasn't
Yeah.
working. That I couldn't figure this thing out. So I had known of a guy with a little gray hair. His name was Bill Lovelace, and he had talked with me before about God's word, and I had read it. I'd always read it, but somehow there was a disconnect between my head and heart. And he explained some things, and when he explained it, it was over a couple breakfast tacos. I remember God saying, "Are you done yet? Are you done living the life I never intended you to live?" And it obviously wasn't audible, but it
Mm.
was what I heard through Bill. And he helped me understand some of the scriptures, like John 15:5. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those that abide in me and I in you, they will bear much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. And I never really thought about what apart from me, you can do nothing really meant. And then I thought, I'm spending my whole life trying to manufacture these things. I'm trying to manufacture love, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, self-control. And what I learned was that I can't manufacture those things over an extended period of time apart from him, apart from my creator. And so at that point, I started to really spend some time deeply thinking and integrating a relationship that would be defined by moment dependence upon him for everything. And that I think that was the catalyst that when you don't anxiety never kind of goes away completely,
Mm.
but it's been more situational than chronic because of
Yeah.
that abiding approach to life. And so that was an important part of my life.
Yeah, man. So, man, that's awesome. What happens after that in terms of how this sort of starts to show up in your family and in your work? Is there sort of this defining pivot where you take maybe a different approach, or is it more this settling in around I'm feeling better, I'm feeling the presence of the Lord in my life
Y-
more?
Yeah, we were talking about our friend beforehand. I'm very heady. And so, it just takes me a while for me not to, for me to reset. And so I spent a lot of time with Bill. We would meet once a week with a group of other guys that were really struggling with this idea too of what does it really mean to trust in him moment by moment. What does this really mean? What do I do? What's my responsibility in all this? I mean, I've got to do something. This whole abiding thing seems real passive. So we spent a lot of time unpacking that and just applying it in situations. So it just became situational more than anything. If I was under stress, I would turn to him and that wasn't the case before. I would get really tense. But that, God would do it was really cool because God would do like if you thought about a house with many rooms, it's like he did a work on this part of my house. And it's maybe the idea of him giving peace in my marriage was immediate. He still had other rooms to clean.
Mm.
And some of those rooms I wouldn't let him clean. So that took a while as I opened doors and said, okay, God, obviously you need to do a good work. And he still does that today. In fact, I was just talking with some guys and I was like, man, I was reading the 10 commandments and that whole coveting thing, that's the 10th commandment. God, I didn't even think about that, but that's something that sometimes just creeps up, Lord. I can't stop coveting. Like, and I don't need stuff. Like, it's not about a car or truck or stuff. I covet what the unique gifts that God has given other men that I don't have. And I'm like, I wish I had that. Okay, God, I can't solve that problem, but if I trust in you enough, which I'll trust in you in each moment, you can resolve that for me. So it's kind of enjoyable to walk with God and just see him how he cleans each room in my life along the journey. So to answer your question directly, the way it's manifested has been more process driven than event driven.
Yeah. What you said there is so impactful for me and something that I've grappled with. And I wonder if others that are hard chargers, type A and or success motivated, those types of things where it's like, man, it's me. Like I'm going to drive, I'm going to do these things. And this notion that I've wrapped my head around and started to embrace over the last few years is more this idea of surrender, right? Of giving control to God and trusting in God. And it's a daily challenge, right? It's a daily challenge, but it's in the front of my mind every day, this challenge and call to surrender and to work as hard as I can work, but then surrender the outcome, surrender what happens to God, that this is part of the plan. And I don't get to understand the plan, if at all, until maybe many years later in hindsight and looking backward. And it's the whole notion of understanding that hard things and challenging things and things that I would recognize and call a negative in my view, I see them as a positive years later and go, oh man, I never would have guessed that, right? That was God working and snapping pieces together that I could never see where that path was going to lead. And yet now I can see it because I've got distance and time and space from it. But it's so hard. And yet we are called to that, right? We are called to surrender. I'm going through the Hallow app right now, Lent
Yeah.
40, and it's a focus around, Jesus, I surrender my life to you. Jesus, I surrender my life to you every day. It's part of the prayer, and it's powerful, but it's hard, right? And I think it's maybe hard I wonder, I love your thought on it, but I think it's hard for men and women that achieve, that consider themselves like, no, I'm going to separate myself from the others by how I act, behave, show up every day, grind through, do the hard things. And this idea that we have to surrender is a hard one. What are your
Uh,
thoughts?
yeah, thank you for asking me that question because it's a really good question. And the vantage point I've had in my life that's just been a blessing is I've got a chance to sit kneecap to kneecap with a lot of wealthy, successful people. Um and you scratch your head in life, you go, what's the point of it all?
Mm,
And I'm seeing these successful people and they've got all the money in the world and they're still worried.
mm,
Like I thought in the trailer park that this was the ticket. You're telling me it's not? Like I'm seeing it in real time. And so then, I mean, there's been, and God, the most wonderful thing about life is when you are depending on him moment by moment, how he reveals things to you and just orchestrates things. And so there was one day where I had a very successful client come in worth millions and millions. They weren't going to have any trouble with their life financially, but chronic anxiety. And I understand anxiety to the degree that there's physiological challenges. I don't discount that. Um, and this could have had elements of this, but I would also suggest to you as self-inflicted. And they were Christians. So that begs the question. So like, why, where's this trust factor? Where's this? And that's kind of a big element of Christianity. And then
mm,
I had another couple come in and all they had in their entire lives was Social Security check coming in on the 3rd of each month. And they had so much peace. They came in holding hands
mm.
and the others were fighting. And I've seen this over and over again. And so I woke up one day and maybe it was a journey where I just realized that there's nothing wrong with money. I mean, certainly we know that, but it is the love of money that's the root of all evil. And the Lord says, He says, you can be devoted to one and despise the other. You can love one or hate the other, but man cannot serve both God and money alone. And so there's over 2,000 scriptures about money. So this is a big issue for God. Jesus talked about it more than hell and heaven combined. And I say all that because sometimes I think we think about money a lot. I mean, I know we do. We think about finances all the time. And if we were to kind of take inventory of our thoughts, how often do we think about God? And I just find that when I can redirect I think about it like a moment by moment dependence upon God. Um, it is, and I know this sounds to you, it sounds like, okay, that makes sense. It is actually a beautiful life.
Mm.
Like it is, he talks about the life that is truly life. It really is. Like
Yeah.
it is absolutely fascinating when you shift. It's not perfect, but your response to all these imperfections completely changes. And the rest of the world is trying to build up this wealth that really they're going to find that it's not going to be satisfying.
Yeah, man. And that your trailer park example is so right on, and it fits for any walk of life, right? This idea that, oh, I'm in this trailer park, I will be happy when I have money. And then, but it doesn't matter if you could be like, I'm living in X high, upper middle class suburb, and I will be happy when I can live in the higher class suburb, or have the vacation home, or be able to go put my kids into this college. All these things, like I will be happy when. And the reality is It's got nothing to do with it, right? And you've gotten to see that in your story of, I've seen really wealthy people be miserable, and I've seen poor people, poorer or less fortunate people be extremely happy. Money has nothing to do with happiness. Money has nothing to do with security or safety or anxiety or lack of anxiety, right? It just doesn't. And yet I've battled that in my life, right? I've battled this whole idea that I can create safety and reduce anxiety and create comfort by my effort if I achieve X once I get to that point. And I know that it doesn't work because I've seen it now play out where I've achieved those things and then go, I don't feel any different. I don't feel any better. In fact, I almost feel worse. I almost feel like I have more anxiety. Like there's more risk of losing it now because now that I've achieved it, boy, it'd be even worse to achieve it and then lose it. It's worse than never having it to begin with, right? So now the pressure is almost amplified. And you think, well, now I think the best way to fix it is to make more. And you think, well, how stupid is that, right? It didn't work the first time. Why was it going to make the second time, right?
You're
But
100% right.
yeah.
Pardon the interruption, everyone. Do you ever feel like you're out of alignment with your true gifts, your passion, and your purpose for being on this earth? Do you feel like you're grinding it out each week with the appearance of success and still asking, is this it? If so, I get it. I've been right where you're at. And once I figured it out for myself, it's why I started coaching. Now I help my clients get back into alignment with their authentic self. I help them find meaning, purpose, joy, and energy in each day. Check out my website at ericsardina.com to learn more and to schedule a free 15-minute strategy session. And now, back to the show.
And I, one of the, a time where God kind of did a work on me there, and it's, obviously I can't claim perfection at all, but it's been an enjoyable journey. But one time we were in kind of the early stages of the business, and we had one car. We were kind of doing the Dave Ramsey thing. We sold the car and did the envelopes, and so I had left my office keys on the table, and so I was locked out of the office. Sitting in my car. It was 4 a.m. because I was going to MTXE my way out of this financial issue, but I couldn't get in the office. So I cried in my car because I was so overwhelmed. And it was in that moment that I said, God, this is not a like quid pro quo. I'm just going to say this, Lord. I trust you enough that I'm going to start giving financially my first fruits. Now, prior to that, I gave when it was convenient, and I knew that it was a responsible thing to do. I knew it was discussed in the Word of God, but I didn't do it in an act of like a commitment. When I was broke, when I was at a bottom, I made a commitment to give. And I haven't stopped that commitment since. And it was in that moment that God did some work on that money gland of mine. And so I would attest a lot of the anxiety around money in my life has been mitigated. I'd say it's the antidote. And actually in Greek, anti means in replace of. It doesn't mean against. So I would suggest to you that to a certain degree, I've replaced money worries with this idea of giving. And it is an important part of my family and our company's ethos.
Right on. Yeah. Not giving out of abundance, but giving out of lack, right?
Yeah.
The first. And that is a powerful thing as well. Talk about biblical responsible investing. What does that mean?
So there's three elements to biblical responsible investing. There's embracing, avoiding, and advocacy. So I'll talk about all three of those. Actually, I'll talk about avoid first. When it comes to investing, we always have to think about investing in companies is really the basis of stock market investing. When you own stock, you actually own a company. You own Google, you own NVIDIA, you own Microsoft. So you have ownership, right? Not enough to make big decisions, but just a small fraction. And so you get to participate in that, the growth of a company because you have ownership. So that's just foundational stuff. So when it comes to ownership, Christians have deeply held convictions, and at the same time, they have ownership of companies that are behaving antithetically to those deeply held convictions. And so in the past, you couldn't reconcile those two. You just had to really just kind of move on in life. You just had to say, that's it. It is what it is. Well, through, and this is actually been in place a long time, but I think just more recently, innovation and academic research has been able to bring bring this biblical responsible investing area to a new light. So biblical responsible investing helps individuals with deeply held convictions avoid companies. That's the avoid companies that are behaving antithetically to a biblical worldview. As an example, some companies have used their own profits to support legislation that would adopt the Equality Act. And you would say, well, the Equality Act sounds good.
Mhm.
But the problem with the Equality Act is, even though it sounds like it's equal for everyone, if you are a preacher or priest or a podcast host or a radio host or a preacher, and you fail to use proper pronouns, or you fail to define marriage as more inclusive, you could be subject to fine, imprisonment, and jail time. I'm not making this stuff up. Look at the Equality Act. And so this legislation that most of the public said that sounds fine, there's many corporations that use profits that are entitled to go to shareholders, Christian shareholders. They use those profits to support that legislation. And after this election year, they'll probably continue to do that depending on who's in office. So what a lot of people said is, look, if you're going to support legislation like that, I'm going to avoid those, being an investor in those companies. So that's one element. And then the other element is embrace. And that says, okay, look, there's companies that are really allowing this world and this country as we know it to flourish. I want to own companies that maybe aren't promoting gambling, but rather maybe finding solutions to Alzheimer's. I want to participate in companies like that because they are making this world a better place. So there are some really good companies with good products that are doing it the right way, good people and good leadership. And then finally, there's the advocacy. And that's when you invest. Usually it's invested through a fund platform. Sometimes you buy it directly, but a lot of times you do it through a fund. It's just an easier way to do it. And so that those funds have a corporate structure and there's people involved. And so when you're doing it, and when those leaders share your same values and they have a stock in your portfolio that's misbehaving, they'll call up the CEO and say, I've got a group of investors that disagree with what you're doing. And we've seen that on multiple occasions. As an example, that there was one case where a DNA manufacturer, which, you think, okay, DNA manufacturer is kind of, that's kind of cool. That's all good. You've Ancestry.com. They were actually selling to the Chinese government, and the Chinese government was using it to identify this minority ethnic group that's typically Muslim. It starts with a U. I forget how to pronounce the name. So that way they could put them in camps and re-educate them. And so they use that DNA test for that. So the management team of this fund called up the corporations and said, hey, we're not going to invest if you keep doing this. And so they hung up on him. But a few months later, they stopped doing it. Now, they'll never say, hey, thank you. You stopped us, right? They'll never do that. But we have reason to believe that we put a pebble in their shoe. So it's that type of behavior that's been missed in the marketplace. And I'm telling you right now, we're seeing a material shift because Christians are starting to use biblical responsible investing. We're seeing a material shift in corporations, the way they're thinking, because they realize 55% of the world's wealth is held by Christians. And we're no longer going to get pushed around by corporations and using our own dollars, ownership dollars that's entitled to us, to undermine deeply held beliefs and religious freedom. So that's a long answer to short question.
No, it's a great answer. I didn't realize it was that involved, that deep, because there's funds you can invest in companies that would say these are green, quote unquote, green companies. You're investing, so you're going to invest in companies that are sort of, so you wouldn't find like an RJ Reynolds,
Yeah.
tobacco maker, because that's I don't want to invest in tobacco or alcohol. But so some of my kids, I've had this conversation with them where they're like, I want to invest in green companies. And so I'm going to invest in this mutual fund that's got some pretty name to it, and it says something about being green. And you think, okay, well then let's look at the underlying companies that are in there, and who's actually in this fund. And then you see it's the same companies, right? It's Microsoft or whoever else, and you think, all right, so how are they green? Maybe they have green policies. And then you can I'm using Microsoft as an example. I don't know if this is 100% the truth for
Sure.
Microsoft, but it does exist where, well, this company's actually not doing anything environmentally green. They're just spending their billions that they have in cash to buy carbon credits so that they can offset the amount of waste or whatever that they're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
So they fall into the category of being green, but they're not green. They're not doing anything green. They're just buying carbon credits and then continuing to pollute however they want to pollute. So I'm like, just be careful on what think you're buying, because it's hard to know what they're actually doing. Just like your example, Darryl, around the equity fund. The words are so powerful, man, and they're used to deceive us in so many ways. And you have constantly have legislation going through. You look at the title of it and you think, wow, this is right in my wheelhouse. This is going to be great. And then you look at the words and the actual things in that policy and you think, this is nonsense. This is as evil as it could be, right? So if you're going to have biblical responsible investing, it would seem that it's going to take a lot of work to make sure you're finding those companies that are doing stuff that you go, no. You might say you're doing one thing, but you're clearly doing something else, and now we're gonna take you out of that fund. It's got to be complicated.
It is, and so there's layers to it. Part of, us being a registered investment advisory firm is that's kind of what we do for people, is help navigate that marketplace. And, the financial marketplace changes just as much as your streaming options. And
Yeah.
so we always have to stay on top of what resources are available, and we have to get sharper there. We're trying to continue to elevate advocacy and trying to find new tools and new resources. And it's it's a passion for me. I mean, I don't feel like I'm working. I mean, I was recently doing research on a company that's a private equity company. So not only can you do some screening for publicly traded companies, but what can you do in the privately held company? Can I scratch my head? Can I have my investors own privately held companies, which may have better returns and influence the way they behave, and then own companies that are behaving justly and righteously. So it can go really deep. So an individual can absolutely do it on their own if they have, I would say, 3 elements. One would be some financial acumen. You just have to know kind of between a stock and a bond. The emotional fortitude, because that is one of those things that can really trip you up, and then time. But if somebody doesn't have those 3 things, then we're the outsource resource for people.
Yep. Right on. I love it. All right. So talk a bit about, if you would, your family's continue to grow. You've got 4 kiddos now, right? And
I do, yeah.
And so, and you mentioned, I think your young daughter who hurt her finger is now a teenager. So you've got some teenagers going on. Your dad, your husband, and you're a business owner, and you're trying to help people manage their finances, which is a very stressful thing when you think about it. On the surface, people, I think, tend to go, oh, financial advisor, he's making a lot of money, he lives a flashy life. But the root of it, because I know people in this space, and I actually was in this space for a brief minute, is it's super stressful because you're managing people's retirement, you're managing their livelihood, you're helping to make sure that they have goals, that they're going to reach those goals. And so there's stress. Talk about balancing that stuff, right? Dad, husband, father, business owner, managing people's wealth and retirement, and how you make all that go.
Yeah, the good news, praise God, there's 25 employees here, so there's a lot of people carrying stuff for me, so I don't feel like the burden. There was times where the burden was all on my shoulders, as you go through those growth phases, and there's seasons of that. Certainly when the market misbehaves, even there's just times just clients get squirrely, or we make mistakes, or stuff happens, missed expectations, miscommunication. We try to shore all those things up, but yeah, it creates stress. And so my faith is strong. I mean, I'm working here today and I'm listening to piano Christian music, trying to keep the word of God alive.
Yeah.
And not that it's dead, but just trying to keep it front of mind. I have a rhythm of prayer. That's a key element. And then I stay in shape, man. I mean, I work out every day, and so that's important to me. I'm a sleep snob. It's kind of, and I eat right. I check all the boxes of keeping myself healthy. I'm generally kind of a nervous kind of guy, so I want to try to get in front of that and just do relaxing things as much as possible. So it wouldn't be uncommon if you see me come home and watch a prank show video for 30 minutes just to get myself to laugh and unwind, and then walk the dog. So I'm pretty intentional about not letting this damage my temple, so to speak. I don't want my body to be all broken. And so get myself checked up and stay in good health.
Right on. It is so important. And I look at it the same way around your physiology. God has given you this blessed body, this amazing creation that heals itself when it's broken and does all these things. And we have a responsibility, I believe, to treat this unbelievable creation well and then see the fruit of that, right? If you treat your body physically well, you tend to feel well. If you treat it poorly, eat bad things, sleep poorly, anxiety comes out, all these different things can manifest. And you think, oh, I'll just medicate it, or I'll take pills to fix my cholesterol, fix my this, my that. And, certainly medication is also a thing created by man that can be used for good, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I want to be sure. I think it's come out before. People are like, oh, you take this harsh view of pharmaceutical or medicine. And I don't mean for that to be, because I think there are a place for it. I just think it's overdone.
Yeah.
And I think we can avoid where we can avoid it. We should avoid it by how we behave and how we eat, sleep, rest, recover, work out, all those things. And it's helps us all to feel better, I think, and be better. So I'm a big believer in that as
Yeah.
well.
For sure.
Talk about, if you would. So there's some things I read in the lead in. You've got a park named after you. You've had Inc. 5000 fastest growing business year after year after year. Best places to work. I didn't mention that, I don't think, but like 10 years in a row, best places to work in San Antonio, in your sector. Talk about that, and maybe how, I don't want to lead this question too much, but you've been tremendously blessed. Do you feel like it's because of how you've kind of approached what you're doing? Or talk a bit about just this, all these things that you've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, I don't really understand it even when I think back on it. There's been some really weird things in my life. And um it it I want to answer the question directly, but let me just mention this. It puts a tremendous amount of responsibility on my shoulders to honor God for what he's done in my life. And so I feel like that is the role I play, because I reflect back and I go, that is absolutely insane, that ever happened. I mean, there's so many other things, like one of my real dear friends was my NBA role model growing up. How does that happen? Like, you have an NBA role model, you see him on TV now, he's one of your dear friends. Senator Cornyn on the U.S. court mentioned my name regarding a tax bill. How does this stuff, like, and this is just not minor, there's stuff all the time. And so all I do is sit here and go, okay, I have a responsibility to my Lord and Savior, because he has a purpose for me. And so I say all that, and I want to be very careful that it's just exclusive to me. I kind of think it's for everyone, and it just manifests different ways. It's been a little odd for me, I would suggest. If I could give credit anywhere, I would give credit to two things. One, I would give credit to a legacy of praying families. I have some Christians in my family history that started churches, and I know they prayed for generations. Two, I had a praying mother. She was 16 when she had me. She didn't have anything but prayer. She had some very difficult childhood. So I would attest to you that I'm a byproduct of other people's convictions and their prayers. And so I want to do the same. I want to pay that forward to generations. So that's the only way I can explain it, because I really didn't do things that's formulaic. I can maybe give you a few little nuggets that along the way, hey, I got up early, I worked a little hard, I was consistent. There's a few little nuggets, but really it wasn't formulaic. It was more supernatural than anything.
Yeah. And what I appreciate about that too, and it's as I asked the question, I was, wanting to interject, but I wanted to let you speak that out. But this idea that we are not puppet masters of God, right? We don't get to control, like, oh, if I treat God right, he's going to treat me right. If I do this, then he's going to do that. And it's like, no, that's not the way it works. And in fact, we need to, and again, I say this from a humble perspective of we, meaning me, need to recognize when I'm going through a season of dryness, a season of lack, a season of want, that I need to be just as prayerful, just as thankful, just as loving to God in those seasons as in the seasons of abundance, right? Recognizing and thanking God for all. And that goes back to that, some of our initial discussion around, thank you, Jesus, I surrender all to you. I thank you for my lack. Thank you for my hunger. Thank you for, thanking God. And that's hard to do. And yet I believe we are called to that. And it's um, because ultimately we're called to love our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourself. Those are the commandments that Jesus said were the two to do, right?
Yeah.
And those are hard to do when you're Job and you're going through, all the chaos that he went through, and he continued to thank God, right? And that's hard, but it's what we're called to do. And I think ultimately, though, God wants the best for us. He wants good for us. He wants us to be abundant in our lives. And so seeing the fruit of that come out is like, okay, yes, it's easy. And I can thank God for that fruit and recognize, and it's harder to see it when I'm in the season of dryness. But what I loved about your answer, it was, I attribute it to others praying for me. It's a family and generational people praying for me, because there is power in prayer. There is power to pray for other people. And so encouraging others to pray for one another, pray for each other, pray for your friends and family, and pray for your enemies, man. I'm reading a really powerful book right now. I'm about a third of the way into it, but I know the theme of the book. It's Father to the Fatherless. And he has the author has a horribly abusive father, like literally almost beat his mother and he and his siblings to death on multiple occasions while being drunk. And then he evolved, certainly as a young child, he hated and feared his father. And then though he comes around to where he's praying for his father, right? He begins to pray for his father, and he sees his father changing. He still has many, many horrible shortcomings, but he sees him softening and sees him changing. And he starts to attribute it to him. I've been praying for him now for years and years. And I see like God working in my father. And so calling people and thinking of ourselves and like, I need to be praying for my enemies as well as my friends, family, and loved ones, as well as as the people I care about. And that's hard. And yet we're called to it, right?
You're right. We are. Yeah, it's a good word. The power of prayer is kind of mysterious. My mom, at 16 and all this stuff that she went through, even as an adult, she continued to pray for us. And so she never really got to see kind of the abundant financial resource. She always struggled financially. I mean, it wasn't until recently, maybe in the last 5 years, that they had some breakthroughs. But prior to that, I mean, it was always. So she spent her whole time in a Job kind of situation, but trusting that God was going to do a work. And so her perseverance, to her credit, she was rewarded by seeing all three of her kids have freedom and success to a certain degree, and something that she never saw in her family ever, or her family before her. She didn't give up on God. Now I contrast that with my grandfather. My grandfather killed himself, and he gave up. Um, and I don't know the entirety of the situation, but sometimes I just wonder, God sometimes orchestrates some really unique things in our lives, like he did for me. And sometimes it's not in our lives, like he didn't do for my mom, but it's at another time that's even greater. And so there's some cool things about prayer that's mysterious. But what I've reconciled is that it's certainly multi-generational in prayer. And I'm learning to be patient with prayer, even as I raise 4 kids and navigate 3 teenagers.
Right. Right on. Powerful stuff. If you don't mind, I'd love to just ask some financial stuff and just get some of your thoughts on finance and the
Yeah.
market and what you see out there right now. I think it would be
Yeah.
interesting for the audience to hear, in a first time in my life, 55 years old. I remember stagflation of the 70s. I remember gas lines, but I was a little guy at the time. And I
Yeah.
think we're in this odd period of the economy's, well, again, I don't want to preload the question, but what's your take sort of on, let's just start with interest rates maybe and the economy.
Yeah, and a couple of precursors also. Let's keep in mind the stock market and the economy are two separate things. Now they do run parallel, but they're actually different.
They are different.
Um, the economy is, I mean, it's crazily, freakishly healthy
Mm,
by most metrics. Not all, but most, and those ebb and flow all the time. But um, the unemployment rate and the is remarkable, and even the labor participation rates are reasonable. So you take that and you collide it with the earnings reports that are coming out in specific areas are bigger winners than others, specifically. And, NVIDIA came out with theirs last night. I mean, that's the definition of a robust economy. I mean, you've got companies making money, even small businesses. There's an NFIB small business index ticking up in terms of optimism. So the definition of a healthy economy with employment and earnings and small business doing well, honestly, it's fascinating to me, despite the fumbles that take place on Capitol Hill. It really is unique. Now, the inflation piece is interesting. Obviously, we're at 9%. Now we're hovering at 3%, and the Fed really wants to get it at 2%. That's their goal. And so really the market has been hyper focused on, will the Federal Reserve keep rates where they're at, or will they lower rates? But I came out with, I don't have much of a prediction in me. I'm more of a preparer than a predictor, but I did anticipate that the Fed is not going to lower rates as much as people had thought. And so that has been, and for those that don't pay attention to this, that has been one of the most important conversations in the market in general, is what will the Fed do? Will they lower rates or raise rates? It makes a difference for mortgage buyers or home builders or business owners that want to borrow money, or companies that want to do mergers and acquisitions and need financing. It really is the lubricant for the entire economy. And so right now the Federal Reserve seems to keep interest rates the same because the inflation gauges haven't quite gone down to that 2%. If they go down to the 2%, then the Fed will lower the rates, spurring on the economy a little bit more, but they're just not getting down to that 2% yet.
Okay. And so are there sectors that you like? Are there areas that you like for investing, or which areas are they?
Yeah, when it comes to investing, kind of shifting gears, I watch the markets every day, and it's hard to ignore the Silicon Valley. I mean, and that's a tricky one too, because a lot of those companies are screened out with the biblical responsible investing. So it becomes a real tricky moral dilemma for me and a lot of people, is because the hottest space has frankly been in that tech AI space. And then the other hot space right now is frankly the weight loss drugs. That's real popular right now. So any stocks related to the weight loss drugs. But then you go to the size of companies, and historically you see that, like, coming out of a market like this, small and mid-sized companies can do pretty well. So, if somebody's looking at their portfolio, they would kind of want to say, do I have some of those small and mid-sized companies? Because that might be a good place to invest. And then finally, I'll say Japan is doing well finally after 34 years. So those are just kind of 4 different areas that are all kind of different, but are ones to watch.
Yep. What are your thoughts on AI? I'm curious.
So, I hear a lot about it. I'm still struggling with the gap of application and how it monetizes, but I've seen some elements of it. Like, we've actually adopted 2 tools of AI. For example, like, I can now take a portfolio statement and do a scan, and it'll upload all of the data into a CSV file that's really usable for me, which would take my staff hours to upload that data with the tickers. So that's artificial intelligence in real time. It'll also give me an analysis of where the gaps are in the investment portfolio through artificial intelligence, which is brilliant time saver. I can do that on tax returns now. I can get an analysis, which I used to have to send a CPA a tax return. He'd come back in a week and say, here's my recommendations. Artificial intelligence will get that back to me in a few hours. So I'm using it now. But I say all that, I haven't yet seen a broad scale application that's revenue generating. I've seen it mostly as cost savings. And so that may be it. That may be the benefit in general, is the cost savings nature that'll create some more. But I'm interested to answer your question. It's fascinating. I believe in it. I know it's there. I know it's real. I'm just not seeing the revenue side of it yet.
Yep. And then what about the battery powered car market and or auto industry?
It's not one I would bet on. I think most people have been more attracted to the hybrids. It's going to be hard for these legacy companies to carry a subsidized, or not even a subsidized, a lost leader, a losing sector of their business model, and at the same time have to support these pensions, and at the same time accommodate the unions. Doing all three of those things is really asking too much for some of these larger companies. Obviously, we have Tesla doesn't have to deal with the pensions or the unions to the degree that these bigger companies have to deal with them. So they're able to be more swift in their applications. But so I think for the traditional manufacturers, I think their space is going to be artificial intelligence. I'm sorry, not artificial, the hybrid, and Tesla's still going to be the leader here, but we might see some noise out of Mexico or Chicago in this space, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I follow a few European car prognosticators, and I'm a car guy, so so they talk about kind of cars and what's coming on the pipeline, and some of the EU regulations that are forcing the shift to battery. And then they're also they've documented, well, the secondary market for battery powered cars is just plummeting because it's got propped up by subsidies, right? So buy this car and you get this massive tax rebate, but you don't get that when you buy a used battery powered car. So there's no benefit to it. And then what do you do with it when the battery needs to be replaced? And just like any battery on a watch or a phone, the battery degrades over time. So what might have gotten you 220 miles of range in 5 or 10 years only gets you 160. And so there's all this kind of issue on the tech. And yet the government mandate is driving the manufacturers to produce more and more and more of these as a percentage of their output, turn their back on what I love is, we have a new term, the ICE, so internal combustion engine used to just be the engine, now is an ICE engine. And so turn them back on that, which is a massively efficient and low cost energy generator of power, right? And yet we're turning our back on it, really, because I believe it became this political stump that, I can kind of garner votes based on my stance on this thing that really doesn't have market underpinnings that would say the consumer is demanding this thing in the percent, to the degree that it's being driven, right? Maybe there's a 5 or 10% of the consumer that's like, I'm willing to have that, but not 30, 40, 80% of the market. And then you compare that to, what if you took every gasoline powered consumer driven gasoline powered car off the road? Because if you took the mandate and said, poof, it's in place today, every powered car comes off the road today, but you can't take away diesel trucks. You can't take away commercial because that does not work. You have to run those off diesel for now. And the current regulations are not talking about taking trucks off the road. So they're only talking about taking consumer vehicles off the road. You save 7% of the CO2 emission impact is from every single consumer driven combustion engine car on the planet. So if you removed them all, you fix 7% of the human derived CO2 emission.
Is the other 93% from gas, the gas from cow farts? Or
I think it's all cow farts. I think it's all cow farts. Yeah. So get used to eating crickets until we figure out that crickets actually have many, many, many more tiny little cricket farts, and they're worse than the cows. We just haven't studied it yet. So then you'll have to move off the cricket.
This is where it goes.
This is where we end up.
It really has gotten this ridiculous. And so, yeah, I'm finding that it's kind of swinging back, though, to some more logical and practical application. I mean, there's a heart factor that exists. I understand the heart of the matter. I question, just like any good Texan, I always question the science. But I still drive my truck. So, but at the same time, what's interesting about biblical responsible investing, kind of just bringing that back in, is biblical responsible investing does consider caring for the earth, because we're called to be good stewards. In fact, I would suggest to you that we kind of miss that. We should have owned that space of caring for the earth. But that got hijacked and now it's running away. But we still have that responsibility of caring for the earth. And I'm a hunter, I'm a fisherman. And so, you're going to see me pick up trash. You're going to see me care for animals. You're going to see me treat everything pristinely. And so I'm not inconsistent there, but I drive a truck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. All right. I want to be respectful of time. So let's start to look to wrap up. What are you focused on, Darryl? What's kind of on the horizon and what are you excited about?
Yeah, that book, Biblical Responsible Investing, the book actually launched last month. So I've been out promoting that and kind of telling that story. And so I've got a lot of presentations. So that's been fun. We'll continue to grow. We serve 1,400 families at PAX. I really want to serve 10,000. That's going to be a challenge. That's a lot of families, and you got to do that in an economical way. So, so those are some fun things. And then, I've got some great vacations planned with my family this year. So that's really exciting.
That's awesome, man. Where can people, if they want to learn more about PAX or learn more about you or find your book, where do they find you?
You can find the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, paxfinancialgroup.com, pretty easy. LinkedIn is a professional way to find me. I don't do Instagram. I like to stay in that professional lane on LinkedIn. So I'll put content there and information on LinkedIn. Although I do have a marketing person, so she has me on an Instagram account. I'm just not really there myself. And then, our Retire in Texas podcast, I'll put market commentary and financial planning stuff on that podcast. It comes out every week. So those are some, like 3 or 4 different ways.
Retire in Texas podcast, and that's on all the platforms that you can find a podcast.
It is, yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome, man. Darryl, it's been a great conversation, brother. I appreciate you being on and sharing all that you shared, and it's been fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's like the mic wasn't even on. I was just having a conversation, so enjoyed it.
Right on. Likewise. To our audience, thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. Always humbled that you do that. If you would share the program with a friend, write us a nice review. Give us a star rating of 5 or more, and give us a 1. It doesn't really matter. Just give us a nice rating. But please give us a rating. And until next time, friends, I'm Eric Sardina. You've been listening to the Return to Authenticity podcast, and bye for now.